The fire crackled in the desert night. A young woman sat bound, her eyes steady though her wrist bled. Around her, warriors argued, some demanding her death, others whispering of mercy. A letter promised war in 3 days. A father raised his gun at his own son, and in that moment, the fate of a people balanced on a single breath. What happened next would decide whether Red Mesa survived or burned. Welcome to WestDream Tales. Here, the Wild West lives again, not just with guns and dust, but with love, courage, and stories that refuse to die. Every tale we tell carries both hardship and hope, because out on the frontier, every choice could change a life forever. The desert sun bled into the horizon, staining the cliffs of Red Mesa in crimson light. Shadows stretched long and jagged across the sand, while the evening wind carried the dry scent of sage and dust. Night was approaching, but peace was far away. Mira Hayes sat near the fire, her hands bound tightly behind her back. The rope bit into her wrists, yet she refused to struggle or cry out. Her chin was lifted, her gray eyes steady as she watched the Apache warriors circling around the flames. They spoke in low tones, voices tense like the string of a drawn bow. Some sharpened their knives. Others murmured prayers to the spirits of their ancestors. The camp breathed with unease, as if every soul knew the night held no rest. At the far side of the fire, Chief Cade stood tall. 60 winters had carved deep lines across his face, leaving him weathered and unyielding like the stone mesas that guarded their land. His gaze was fixed on a single folded paper clutched in his hand. He lifted it higher, letting the firelight touch its words. 3 days, he growled in English, the syllables rough but clear. The cavalry comes in 3 days. 3 days to decide the fate of our people. The warriors muttered, some in fear, others in defiance. The letter bore the seal of the army, a promise written in cold ink: surrender or face destruction. To Cade, it was not a warning, it was a verdict already passed. Rowan stepped forward from the shadows, the fire painting his young face with streaks of orange and gold. At 25, he carried the blood of warriors, yet his eyes held something different: curiosity, the hunger for knowledge beyond the canyon walls. Father, he said firmly, holding her won't change their march. They won't come to talk. They'll come with rifles and cannons. His voice rang sharp in the night, drawing every gaze toward him. Cade's head snapped around, eyes blazing. And what do you know of armies? He thundered. You have not seen treaties torn apart. You have not watched sacred ground stolen piece by piece. I have lived long enough to bury every promise they ever made. Rowan did not retreat. His hand brushed the knife at his belt, but he did not draw it. Instead, he stood tall, facing his father with calm defiance. But keeping her here will only give them reason to strike faster. Cade's voice rumbled like distant thunder. This girl is the only weapon left to us. They may laugh at our arrows. They may crush our warriors. But one white girl in our hands, this is a weight they cannot ignore. The words sank into the circle of men. Some nodded, faces hardened by grief and hunger. Others looked away, troubled, their loyalty torn between the wisdom of age and the daring of youth. Mira shifted on the hard earth, the fire flickering against her pale skin. She said nothing, yet her silence was louder than protest, eyes scanning every detail, ears catching every word, as though her life depended on remembering it all. One warrior spat into the dust. Another crossed his arms, glancing from Cade to Rowan. The air thickened, heavy as storm clouds, and for a heartbeat the fire itself seemed to hold its breath. Rowan's tone softened, almost pleading. Father, there are children starving, old ones too weak to walk. A hostage will not feed them. Knowledge, new ways this could give us a chance to survive. Cade barked a bitter laugh. Knowledge? Did books stop the flood when it drowned the valley? Did clever words keep the government wagons from turning back empty? No. Only strength holds what is ours. Mira's gaze flicked from father to son. For a fleeting second, Rowan's eyes met hers across the fire. In his look, she did not see cruelty, but a restless determination, something that unsettled her more than hatred ever could. The circle tightened. Spears thudded into the ground. The warriors awaited the next word, the next spark that might ignite bloodshed within their own ranks. Rowan's jaw tightened. If we follow this path, we'll only find death at the end. He looked back at his father, his voice clear and unshaken. The girl is not our shield. She is a chain dragging us toward ruin. Cade's hand gripped the hilt of his knife. His eyes burned like coals, the rage of a man who had lost too much to yield now. You speak like one of them, he snarled. Have their wagons filled your belly? Have their schools given you pride? No, they have taken and taken, and now you would give them more. A ripple of agreement stirred through the older warriors. Yet from the younger men came silence, an uneasy silence that spoke of doubt. The firelight showed the fracture spreading through the tribe. Mira's voice broke through at last, low but steady. He's right, she said in English, each word clear as a bell in the night. Her wrists ached from the ropes, but her eyes did not waver. Holding me won't bring your people food. It won't stop their march. Gasps stirred. Few expected the captive to speak. Fewer still for her to speak with such calm. Rowan's head turned sharply toward her, as if surprised by her courage. Cade spat into the fire, the flames hissing in answer. Be silent, girl. Your tongue is not welcome here. But the damage was done. Her words lingered like sparks drifting into dry grass. The camp grew restless. Drums of unease beat in every chest, for every warrior nodding to Cade's fury. There was another glancing toward Rowan with a flicker of uncertainty. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the dusk. Mira's heartbeat thudded against her ribs, but she kept her breathing steady. Panic would only feed their anger, calm might buy her time. Above them, the desert sky deepened to violet. Stars pricked through, cold and distant, watching the fragile balance of power below. The wind carried the smell of gun oil and smoke from fires burning on other mesas far away. Cade raised the letter once more, shaking it as if to strike the truth into stone. This is what they promise us. 3 days, then fire and steel. And you would tell me not to hold on to the one weapon I still have. Rowan's reply came steady as stone. She is not a weapon. Father, she is a spark that could burn this tribe to ashes. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of firewood and the restless shifting of feet in the sand. Tension coiled like a rattlesnake ready to strike. And then a gunshot cracked through the night. Every head snapped toward the darkness beyond the camp. Horses whinnied, warriors froze. The fire trembled in its pit. Mira's breath caught in her throat. Was it the cavalry scouts from the army creeping closer, or only a lone hunter chasing deer through the canyons? No one moved. The desert held its breath. Cade's hand hovered over his knife. Rowan's gaze swept the shadows. Mira's pulse hammered in her ears. The night had spoken, and the fate of Red Mesa would answer soon. The desert had forgotten the taste of rain. For 3 relentless years, Red Mesa baked under the sun. Its canyons cracked open like the skin of an old drum. Streams ran dry, corn withered in the fields, and children woke at night with lips too parched to cry. Cade had lived through many seasons, but never such hunger. Each sunrise he watched mothers break their bread into smaller pieces, offering crumbs to little ones while they chewed on emptiness. Every promise of government rations dissolved like smoke in the wind. Once, Cade had signed treaties with the men who wore blue coats. They spoke of friendship, of peace, of trade, but each parchment became ash land stolen, grazing fields fenced, and rivers claimed as property. So Cade hardened. To him, survival was no longer a matter of hope. It was a war already forced upon his people. He believed only the firm grip of strength could shield them from vanishing. Rowan, his son, carried a different fire. He had grown up hearing his father's stories of betrayal, yet his own heart longed for something else. When he wandered near trading posts, he saw tools glinting in the sun, clever machines that carved wood, barrels that caught rain, lamps that burned brighter than the stars. He listened to scraps of English words tossed by merchants. He memorized shapes on their maps, tracing rivers and valleys his tribe had walked for generations. Rowan's mind whispered that survival might come not only from arrows, but also from knowledge. 1 week before the shot in the night, the Hayes family crossed the mesa. They were traveling westward, wagons creaking beneath the weight of dreams bound for California. Dust covered their clothes, but hope still clung to their voices. Mira Hayes rode beside her father, a girl of 19 with eyes like storm clouds. She carried a small satchel of books and herbs, remnants of lessons from her grandmother. She dreamed of the ocean, of a place where the air did not cut the throat dry. When their horses stopped at a stream, they did not know it was sacred. The water bubbled from red rock, clear and cold, a lifeline treasured by the Apache. But to the Hayes family, it was only relief on a sweltering day. They filled buckets, laughed, and drank deep. Then shadows moved along the cliffs. Warriors descended like hawks, spears gleaming in the sun. Mr. Hayes reached for his revolver. Mira's mother gasped, clutching her younger son to her chest. The air quivered on the edge of bloodshed, and then Rowan stepped forward. He shouted in Apache, then switched to broken English, his voice cracking from the effort. "Stop no killing. They take water, not land." The warriors hesitated. Cade's eyes were thunder, demanding vengeance for the trespass. But Rowan's words hung heavy, slowing the strike that would have ended the family's journey. Mira watched, heart pounding, dust clinging to her lashes. In Rowan's face, she saw something strange, not hatred, not mercy, but a restless searching. It startled her, more than the spears. The standoff could have drowned in blood, but Mira made a choice. Her voice cut through the heat. "Keep me," she said, steady and fierce. "Let my family go." Her father shouted in protest, but her eyes silenced him. Her brother wept as their mother dragged him back toward the wagon. The warriors parted, allowing the family to vanish into the horizon. Cade stared at Mira, as if weighing her soul. A daughter of settlers young, unbroken, proud. She would be his bargaining stone against the cavalry. The next days tested her resolve. Ropes around her wrists, watchful eyes at every step. Yet Mira did not crumble. She counted the hours, memorized paths, and studied the rhythm of the camp. She also watched the hunger, children with hollow cheeks, elders who coughed until their voices faded into silence. Her grandmother had taught her simple remedies: leaves for fever, roots for wounds, water boiled to chase away sickness. At night, she whispered those lessons to herself, waiting for a chance. When a child collapsed with fever, Mira could not hold back. She asked for water, mimed the motions until Rowan understood. He fetched the supplies, and together they soothed the child's brow until the trembling eased. Rowan returned often after that. He asked about the strange glass mirrors settlers used to catch the sun. He wanted to know why iron pots boiled faster, how cloth could be spun tighter. Mira answered with caution. She kept her words clipped, wary of giving too much. Yet Rowan's curiosity disarmed her more than any weapon. One evening, she showed him how to build a frame to catch rain from the canvas of a tent. When drops filled the container, Rowan's eyes widened like a boy seeing fire for the first time. His laughter startled even him, a sound Mira never expected in that grim camp. But she did not soften. She reminded him, "None of this matters if I remain your prisoner." Her voice was iron wrapped in silk, steady and unyielding. Rowan paused, troubled by her words. He had begun to see her less as captive, more as teacher, even challenger. And in that shift, seeds of doubt took root in his heart. Cade noticed. He caught Rowan lingering near the girl, and his gaze turned cold as winter stone. In the chief's mind, affection was weakness, and weakness meant death. Still, the days passed under the weight of drought and fear. The cavalry's shadow loomed closer with every sunrise. The fate of the tribe, and of Mira, spiraled toward a storm no one could escape. The days dragged like stones through the camp. Smoke curled from weak fires. The scent of hunger carried on every breeze. Mira watched with eyes that burned between pity and defiance. She hated the ropes, the stairs, the fact that her family rode free while she remained bound. But at night, when the coughing of children echoed through the canyon, she felt a thorn twist inside her chest. Suffering was not an enemy you could fight with bullets, it was everywhere, in every breath. Rowan worked quietly at the edge of camp. He tried small things Mira had shown him, using a shard of glass to catch the sun and start a flame, stretching canvas to gather morning dew. When fire flared or water dripped, the people looked at him not as a rebel son, but as someone carrying hope. Still, Mira's voice stayed sharp. "These tricks won't matter if you keep me chained," she said one evening, her wrists raw but her eyes steady. Her defiance unsettled Rowan more than her silence ever had. He found himself drawn not by her beauty, though she carried it like a hidden blade, but by her will. She did not bow, even when surrounded by enemies. That strength called to him, like a drumbeat only he could hear. Outside, pressure grew like storm clouds. The cavalry's messenger returned with a threat: return, the girl or face war. Behind the letter came whispers that the government might cut what little rations still trickled toward the tribe. Around the fire, arguments split the camp. Young men leaned toward Rowan's ideas, drawn by the promise of learning and change. The elders, scarred by loss, clung to Cade's vision of survival through force. The tension was a rope pulled taut. Every word threatened to snap it, and Mira sat in the middle, the knot binding them all together. One night, Cade found Rowan speaking with her. The fire cast shadows across his scarred face as he stepped into the circle. "What is this?" he roared. "My son learns from the enemy." Rowan stood, unflinching. "She teaches survival, not betrayal. Hope is not treason." His words rippled through the camp like sparks leaping from wood. Cade's anger was a storm breaking. "You dare speak of hope while our people starve? You would trade our pride for scraps of their knowledge." His knife gleamed, though it stayed at his side. Rowan's voice cracked with urgency. "She shows us ways to live, new ways that can keep children alive. Can you not see that for the first time?" Rowan spoke not as son, but as challenger. The warriors gathered. Eyes shifted between father and son. Breaths held as if the earth itself waited for the outcome. And then Mira rose. Her Apache was halting, broken, but her voice carried like iron. "Do not make him choose. You need both father and son, tradition and new." The words were jagged, but their weight was undeniable. A murmur swept the circle. Some laughed at her clumsy tongue, but others felt the truth within it, heavy as stone. Cade's jaw clenched. He looked at her with fury, then at Rowan with disappointment, but the spark of uncertainty had entered his gaze. The council met that night. Voices clashed in the dark, elders demanding obedience, youth demanding change. No side won. No side yielded. The tribe split like a canyon carved by water. Mira watched from the shadows, her heart a battlefield of its own. She longed for escape, for her family, yet she also longed for an end to this endless chain of blood. Rowan approached her after the council. "They will not listen," he admitted. "Not yet, but tomorrow. Scouts say the cavalry comes." His voice carried both fear and determination. Mira's pulse quickened. The end was near, yet nothing was decided. Her role as captive had become something far more dangerous. She was now the thread between survival and destruction. That night, sleep abandoned the camp. Warriors sharpened blades. Children clung to their mothers. Mira lay awake, staring at the stars. Every glimmer seemed to whisper a choice she did not want to make. Run, stay, speak, or fall silent. The wrong choice could bury them all. And as dawn crept closer, the sound of drums echoed faintly from the horizon. The storm was no longer waiting. It was already marching toward Red Mesa. The sky over Red Mesa broke with a pale light. Morning crept across the canyon like a knife cutting through shadow. Every warrior felt it in his bones the day had come. The cavalry rode in with banners raised. Their boots thundered against the earth, flags snapping in the cold wind. Dust lifted in clouds as hundreds of hooves struck the desert floor. Cade stood at the front of his people, Rowan beside him, chin lifted, eyes burning with something more than fear. And Miri, wrists bruised but spirit unbroken, was dragged forward as proof of their defiance. Colonel Morrison dismounted, his coat heavy with gold trim. His face was carved with arrogance, but his voice carried the weight of authority. "Release the girl," he commanded. "Refuse, and we will crush you." The warriors tightened their grip on their spears. Children huddled behind the women, the silence broken only by the distant snort of horses. It was the silence before a storm. Cade's voice thundered back. "You have broken every promise. You have stolen land, starved our children. Do you now come for our last breath?" His words echoed against the cliffs, raw with fury. Morrison did not flinch. "The girl belongs to her family. Return her, or you will bury your tribe beneath Red Mesa." Behind him, soldiers raised their rifles in silent warning. Rowan stepped forward. "She can save lives," he said firmly. "If we choose peace, if we choose to learn, the future does not have to end in ashes." His words were not for the colonel, but for his father. Cade turned, eyes blazing. "You would trade the blood of your ancestors for the mercy of liars." His hand pulled free the revolver at his hip, heavy and cold in the morning light. Gasps rippled through the tribe. A father's weapon, not pointed at the enemy, but at his own son. Mira's breath caught, her heart slamming against her chest. Rowan did not raise his weapon. He stood tall, facing the muzzle without blinking. "I don't betray you, Father. I honor you. I want our people to live, not to vanish into graves." Cade's hand trembled. For the first time in years, doubt cracked through his rage. In Rowan's face, he saw courage that looked too much like his own youth before bitterness turned it to stone. Mira tore free from the guard beside her. Pain seared her wrists as the rope snapped, but she did not slow. She vaulted onto a horse and rode between the two sides. Her voice carried across the canyon. "I was torn from my family. Each day I wondered if they lived or died. I have reason to hate both sides. But more blood will only bring more broken families like mine." Her cry cut deeper than any blade. She turned to Cade. "Killing your son will not save your people." Then to Morrison, "And a slaughter will not bring justice to me." The standoff froze. Soldiers shifted uneasily, their rifles quivering. Warriors glanced at each other, torn between vengeance and the fragile promise of peace. Cade lowered his revolver, not as surrender, but as recognition. The weight of leadership slid from his shoulders into Rowan's waiting hands. Morrison frowned, uncertain. The girl's defiance had unsettled him more than the Apache spears ever could. "Negotiate," he spat, though the word burned his tongue. Rowan stepped forward, voice clear. "Then let us speak, before the desert swallows us all." It was the first time the tribe looked at him not as son, but as leader. The sun climbed higher, spilling fire across the mesa. Blades of grass shivered in the wind. Rifles lowered, spears grounded. The storm had not broken, but its edge had been blunted. Red Mesa breathed again, not in triumph, not in defeat, only in fragile survival. And from that breath, a new beginning whispered on the wind. The dust of battle settled without blood. For the first time in many years, Red Mesa stood silent, not from death, but from a fragile truce. The sun climbed higher, bathing the camp in light that felt almost unreal. The negotiations stretched long into the day. Words cut sharper than any blade. But for once, words did not draw blood. Rowan spoke with the calm of a man who knew the weight of every syllable. Morrison listened, though reluctance burned in his eyes. He could not admit defeat, yet Mira's defiance lingered in his mind. At last, he signed an agreement: food would return, and the tribe would keep their land for now. The warriors exhaled, some in disbelief, others in relief. Mothers wept quietly, holding children close as if life itself had been spared. Cade stood apart, his face shadowed, pride tempered by a strange stillness. That evening, the fire burned low. The tribe gathered, not to celebrate, but to breathe. Survival itself felt like a miracle. Cade placed a hand on Rowan's shoulder. "You are ready," he said, his voice hoarse. "I am too old, too bitter. The tribe must follow you now." It was not surrender, it was passing the torch. Rowan bowed his head, not as a son, but as a leader. The warriors murmured, acknowledging the shift in silence. Change had come, not by conquest, but by choice. Mira was told she was free. The soldiers expected her to ride back with them, to vanish from Apache lands forever. But Mira's answer stunned them all. "I will stay," she said simply. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with resolve. "I will teach your children to read. I will help them learn words that can build, not destroy." Gasps rippled through the camp. Some looked at her with suspicion, others with awe. Rowan's eyes softened, though he did not speak. Later, Cade asked her quietly, "You could have let me fall. Why did you stop me?" Mira met his gaze, steady as stone. "I didn't save you. I saved him. And I saved myself from becoming cold as you." Cade nodded slowly, a weary smile ghosting across his face. "For that, I thank you. Not for mercy, but for truth." The words felt like the last he had strength to give. Days passed, then weeks. The cavalry withdrew, their banners fading into distance. Red Mesa returned to its rhythm, scarred but alive. Mira opened a small school beneath the shade of a cedar tree. Children gathered, eyes wide as she drew letters in the dirt. Her voice carried not as a captive, but as a teacher. Rowan often came quietly. He chopped wood, set benches, or showed boys how to track rabbits in the hills. At times, he lingered at the edge, watching her hand move across the slate. One afternoon, Mira turned to the children with chalk in hand. Through the open window of the cabin, Rowan stood outside, his shadow stretched across the doorway. Their eyes met, holding in silence longer than words could bear. Neither spoke, neither needed to. Something fragile had begun to grow like water seeping through stone. Cade watched from a hill above. The chief who once clung to anger now sat quietly, gazing at the sight below. Sometimes he whispered to the wind, "A storm brings rain, not ruin." Mira wrote in her journal that night. The West is not held by guns or gold. It endures through courage, the courage to see an enemy as a neighbor and a neighbor as family. Her words closed the page, but not the story. For Red Mesa, survival was no ending. It was the beginning of something neither side had expected. Not peace, not yet, but the echo of peace, carried on the desert wind. You've just heard another story from WestDream Tales. If it moved you, share it, leave a comment, and subscribe so the spirit of the frontier never fades. Until our next tale, ride safe, dream wild, and keep the West alive.